Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our third installment here of learning about life insurance, disability insurance, and today I'm excited for because we get to start talking about retirement planning. So I'm back again with Ben Mathews with Northwestern Mutual, and today, Ben, this is the one, as we were just talking a little pre-show here, is the one I'm the least familiar with in terms of the right questions to ask. So my coming from curiosity should be similar to what the audience here would be asking. So let's just start out with the most basic setup of this, right? What is a retirement account? What are some of the things that constitute a retirement account from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a technical definition, if we're going to consider an account a retirement account, right? So clear delineation, if you are, for example, investing in Robinhood, that is not a retirement account, even if your goal for that is retirement, right? The technical definition would be a qualified account that you cannot access until you turn 59 and a half years old without significant penalties or tax consequences, right? So a 401k, an IRA, things like that, those are retirement accounts. You're putting those dollars in that account with the idea you're not going to touch them until retirement age.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense. So a qualified account. So again, just putting money into a savings account and saying, when I retire, I will use this money. That's not a retirement account. That's just you putting money into a bank account, right? So, all right. So a qualified account, right? And I think the kicker is you have penalty to take money out of that account prior to the age at which you're able to extract the benefit from it, right? All right. So let's move into some of the most common. And I think from this conversation here, there's a lot of people who will not be going 50 layers deep with any of this, with any of the financial planning. Most people are going to want to take the first 1, 2, 3 steps into this. They want to just take the basic first steps with life insurance, the basic first steps with disability, and the basic first with retirement accounts. And then they can accelerate that down the road if they feel more comfortable with them and they can add on. But for now, so the two ones that you kind of said there, all right, let's start there. So you have a 401k and then you have an IRA. And a lot of times there's a Roth IRA component. So let's just put the Roth to the side for a second. Let's just start with 401k. Yeah. I know nothing about it, right? Just say, I've never even heard this word before. In your best attempt here, get me to understand just what a 401k is.
Yeah, absolutely. So what a 401k is usually through your employer. It's a tax advantage retirement account. What that means is that you're agreeing to contribute, let's say 5% of your income to be deducted before taxes, pre-tax, into this 401k that will be invested into a general account, whoever company or retirement investment strategy that your employer uses. Everyone's different. And will grow tax-free until retirement. Now, the kicker, the exchange for that, so you get the advantage of using every dollar that you earn, that you contribute, to be accumulating that investment to grow, to have the most growth you can possibly get. The exchange for that is that when you take contributions out of that in retirement, those contributions you've made will be taxed at the income tax rate of that point in time. So you're exchanging paying taxes now for paying taxes in the future with the idea of more growth, since you're not sacrificing those dollars to taxes at that point in time. So, and the general advice, if anyone is thinking about retirement but doesn't want to go super into the details, because there's a ton of different strategies, from using permanent life insurance, what have you. If you want to start a successful path to retirement, if you're in your 20s, just start contributing to your employer's match, right? Because usually, let's say you at 5%, your employer will match up to 5%, 100%. That's basically 10%, with half of that being free money that your employer is giving you, right? So if you're thinking like the most bare bones basic thing to do towards retirement, contribute to your 401k at minimum up to the employer match. And that will set you up very well for the future.
Okay. All right. I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
So you said most of the time it's offered through your employer. If I am in a company where I don't have an employer program that's offering that, is this something I can get on my own individually?
There's a variety of different pathways for that. One of the most clearest ways to do that is an IRA. It's an individual retirement account.
Okay.
Now, with IRAs, there's a lot more restrictions in terms of if you make a certain amount of income, you can't qualify to contribute to that anymore, things like that. In that kind of scenario, you would definitely need to sit down with a financial advisor who can kind of run through the options.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So I'm getting this concept of the 401k. So obviously, so I make, let's say I'm earning an income from my job, right? I'm earning however much money per month. And I'm going to take a portion of that pre-tax and I'm going to put it into this account. And by doing that, by constantly putting the money into this account from my pre-tax income, I can, and it's not getting taxed as it's going in, right? It's just getting put in. The law of compounding interest, by adding more to that, is what I'm hoping is really going to ramp up and have that hockey stick type level, exponential growth by the end, by the time I'm then ready to take some of it out of that. Now, when you said I do take it out, so let's say now I'm 60 years old, right?
Yeah.
I've now just passed the time when I'm allowed to start drawing from my 401k without penalty, right? Hopefully I've taken this real long growth. The question that I would have is, obviously in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, when I'm contributing to this, my income level may be less than when I'm in my 60s, right? I might be really ramping up in my income game at 60. But I'm assuming there's also the converse. Your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and maybe early 50s are your best income earning years, and I'm going to be earning much less when I'm 60. So here's the trade-off that I'm wondering. Do you make a recommendation on whether to contribute to a 401k if you have a conversation with someone where they're expecting to make more at 60 or they're going to be making less than they are now at 60? Like, is that a conversation you would have with them based on the tax bracket that they would be in then versus where they are maybe now?
Yeah. So the conversation surrounding taxes when it comes to these kinds of accounts has to be had and is more of a detailed conversation. What I mean by that is that's where Roths come into play. So the problem with pre-tax is because ideally, as you get older, as you become more of an expert in your field, your income's going to grow. Yeah. And you're going to expect a certain lifestyle in retirement, even though it may be less than your peak earning years. It'll definitely be more than your lifestyle in your 20s or maybe even your 30s, right? And trend of things, especially when you talk about the U.S. debt and everything else, it's very likely taxes are going to go up as the years go on, right? So then the question comes, how much of a cost am I willing to bear from these taxes that I don't know what they're going to be, likely higher when I'm in retirement, compared to the cost of living that I want to afford? And how much of a drain is that going to be on my retirement accounts? So that's where a Roth comes into play, like a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, wherein instead of contributing pre-tax dollars, you're contributing post-tax dollars. You're paying the taxes now in exchange for when you're in retirement. All of the gains, all the funds in that account are tax-free. You can take out tax-free.
But obviously, but real quick, right before you continue, but obviously, if I'm getting taxed on the way into this, then there will be less exponential growth and compound interest that I would expect to earn, because over the same period of time, if I'm just adding a little bit less into the Roth IRA version versus my 401k, at the end of it, all things equal, I'll have more money in my 401k, but then I have to worry about the tax bracket there. Whereas with this, I might not quite get up to that same level, but I can just then take this all out without the penalty and once I hit my qualifying age, I can take it out without being taxed at that point. So I think you're right. I think this does come down to maybe what income level you're at currently, what tax bracket you're in currently, and what the expectation of your income would be. Because I would imagine there are a lot of people who would expect to earn more, but there's also some people who say, at that age, I'm going to be scaling. Hopefully I'm going to be scaling way back. So maybe I won't be earning the income there. And then it's also, like you said, one of the things that was always told to me by somebody, it was a father of somebody that I went to high school with. They did very well for themselves, and he was always somebody I looked up to. And one of the things he said is, like, when you start looking at the time when you're going to be retiring, and as you're starting to go through that period of time and where the taxes are going to go, you got to remember, like, baby boomers are all starting to retiring, and they have been retiring for a while now. And that's a huge part of the population, right? The millennials are the biggest workforce component right now, and baby boomers are obviously in the biggest retirement zone at the moment. So are we going to expect that we're going to pay less in taxes in order to support all of the Medicaid, all the different things that we're going to have to contribute to for that generation and also for the generations after that. So I think that's an interesting conversation. And you're right. I don't know neither of us know the answer of what's best. What's best is what's best for you, what's best for the job you're in, the age you are, your expectations, where you're going with things, how much you're willing to put in, what your tax brackets are currently versus the expected in the future. So you're right. As you get any more specific with this, you have to do a needs analysis. You have to just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to have a financial advisor review my stuff, review my what I have, where I'm at, the plans for the future, who I'm supporting, all of those things. And really, you have to go through that exercise to know which one of these better. You can't just pick one randomly. You got a 50-50 chance of being right, but if we're only picking these two, but I'm sure there are some other different versions of these things. So, all right, so that's really interesting. So the biggest takeaway I'm getting is that the 401k pre-tax income can get it a little bit bigger, but taxed on the way out, versus the Roth IRA where we tax it up front, put it in there, so that when I hit my qualifying age, I take it out tax-free, right?
Absolutely. And a scenario example that we could play, because our tax system functions in tax brackets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that will likely be the same when we're in retirement, right? So let's say, for example, at 20, if you make $100,000 or more, you pay 20% in income tax, but anything under that is 10%. This is just a very basic example. It's a little bit more complicated than that. And so you want to pay as little taxes as possible, while also, let's say, living off of an income of $115,000 a year, right? So the strategy would be, let's pull $90,000 from the 401k. So you'd be paying 10% in taxes, because that's the only thing that's taxable of what we're talking about. And then the remaining $25,000 for that year out of the Roth IRA. So there are different ways to do this and structure this to be tax advantaged. Again, really the name of the game with this is diversification. It is not being overly reliant on one thing. And having a 401k is excellent, but not the whole thing. And again, it also depends on what the goals are for that individual in retirement.
I can have a 401k and a Roth IRA simultaneously, right? And I can contribute to both. And I think you're right. I have both these things. And then based on just, hey, if I do a 60-40 split into this one, that's going to get me just enough into this one so that I hit the right tax bracket, and I'll put the remainder in this one, or vice versa, or whatever it is. But okay, all right. So that's good. So you can have it. So let's go a little bit more in depth with what these things are. So I gave the crude savings account metaphor at the start, right? I'm just putting money over here in this account, and then it'll grow based on just an interest rate that the bank gives me or whatever. The 401k and the Roth IRA, from what I can remember and kind of interpreting, this is more of a stock and market based, right? So all right. So I'm going to give $5,000 this month towards my 401k. Like, what happens with that 5,000? Is it, again, just put into a bank account? Are securities purchased with it? Does it go into an overall fund? Am I buying into like an index fund or a mutual? Like, where does the money go in the most simplest of terms?
So it depends on, again, what kind of investment firm and fund that a company is using. But generally speaking, it's put into a diversified investment account. You're buying a variety of different stocks. They may be U.S.-based companies, foreign companies. Some may be blue chip, i.e., your established, like Disney, companies like that you know aren't going away. They just don't have amazing, spectacular growth. They're stable, to these kind of more speculative companies that are like relatively new, kind of unpredictable, things like that. And then also bonds and other municipal related items. And the reason why, depending on what stage you are in life, depends on how speculative it is versus how stable it is, if you could say, right? So if you're in your 20s, and again, it depends on the fund, it depends on what that company's using. Again, another reason why to have a financial advisor look over it to make sure that your dollars are being put to work in the right way. You'd likely be more speculative. The idea for more aggressive growth while you're younger, because you have a lot of time to make up any losses that could occur. As you get closer and closer, the fund will automatically start exchanging that to safer options, a lot more stable options, income-based stuff. Because when you're in retirement, you don't want fluctuation in your account. Now, the biggest gain with any 401k or retirement account is that when the stock market goes up, guess what? Your money goes up too. Your funds in retirement go up too. The greatest vulnerability you have is when there's a market downturn, which historic trends, every 5 years, there's a market downturn. And so that's why as well, yes, having IRA, having 401ks, all that is great. But why also looking at things like permanent life insurance or what have you is important too, so that you're not at the whim of the market. Because if anyone on here, a lot of people do have like a Robinhood account. It's the easiest explanation. You constantly see numbers going up, things going down. None of those are locked in until you sell that stock, right? And when you do, and you're going to be selling stock every time you take a distribution from your 401k, those losses are locked in. So the idea is, okay, if we're having a year like with COVID, like with 2020, instead of pulling from my 401k as much as I can, I'm going to take from my cash balance in the permanent life insurance or whatever other non-stock market correlated account you have to make up the difference, right? So a little bit more detail, but there's a lot of strategies surrounding this. But yes, basically putting it, your IRAs, your 401ks, those are invested in the stock market.
Okay, right. So you have a combination of different securities, bonds, T-bills, all sorts of things that you end up doing inside of that. And that adds the risk of that is, I don't know in another 32 years or 33 years when I'm at the age of retirement, right? I don't know if it's going to be a market downturn. I don't know if the market's going to be good, average, down, whatever. I mean, I'm going to be a little at the whim of where the market is. But if at age 65, I need to start selling part of those securities and we're in a down market in order to live and subsist, yeah, I'm going to be taking an actualized loss on that. Or, I won't have as much of the gain as I could have if I sold it a year before, or if I sell it 3 years after that. I'm just in this valley at the moment. So interesting. So you do still have, and that's for both of these, right? For the Roth IRA as well. And for this, it's a similar thing. It's just, so I guess what I'm summarizing here is that both the 401k and the Roth IRA are market-based, securities-based type, programs. 401k and Roth IRA are just a difference in the way pre-tax or post-tax income as it goes in there, whether you're getting taxed on the way in or out, and then at the end when you're getting taxed on the way out. Okay, so that's interesting. And obviously, I think when we talk about risks, well, it's inherent. All securities run the risk of loss, right? All companies, even Disney, could go to bankrupt. I mean, this, like you said, the blue chip stocks are way less likely to go bankrupt, but there's a lot of, like you said, there's some Forex stuff that goes on, some foreign exchange stuff that goes on, and there's also some of the more risky stocks that get included. And you're right, when you're younger, maybe you're 60, 70, 80% stocks and 20% bonds, but then as you move through life, you kind of shift from maybe 50-50, and then as you get much older, you really go to that, much more the bonds and the annuities and things like that, and way less of the speculative market items. Okay, so what are we missing with that? What am I missing if I were to say, okay, I went and talked to my employer, they do a match. I want to do both the 401k, the Roth IRA. I understand that it's going to be invested into those different things. Do I set that up with my employer? Do I set that up with somebody from Northwestern, and then my employer Northwestern can communicate, or we just have some agreement that yes, part of my direct deposit will actually get sent directly out to Northwestern, and it will get invested, occurring? Is that the base? That's basically it, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot more moving parts of that.
Yeah, so basically, when I sit down with someone, we look at what the employer offers first, because you have usually that match, right? We want you to get as much free money, basically, as possible, but that's what that employer match represents. Beyond that, so again, we look at, see what your employer offers. Let's say a 401k, we'd say start contributing to that. We may say contribute more to that. We wouldn't necessarily say leave that and put that with us. Now, if you've jumped jobs, guess what? Your 401k from that past job, unless if you've rolled it over into the new one, is just sitting there and it's not being actively managed quite as much. So the other aspect of this too is that's when we would come into play in terms of maybe putting it into a mutual fund or something else like that to get better growth than it would be just sitting there. So there's a variety of different options. The other key thing, though, I do want to mention too. Now, the biggest risk, the scariest thing when we talk about the stock market is fluctuations. Now, the reason why having your retirement funds in a 401k, what have you, is one of the more advantageous way to do it, besides the tax stuff and everything else, is the greatest hedge against inflation. Because the problem with keeping cash under the mattress or into a standard savings account is it depreciates significantly. The buying power of $100 4 years ago is a lot different than the buying power of $100 now, let alone if you're thinking 30, 40 years out, right? So having that invested ensures that your income and potential for retirement grows with inflation too, is just also not being fully reliant on those two things and having that sort of cash equivalent account, whether that's a permanent life insurance policy, whether that's through investing in real estate and having rental income through that, or a pension, which is very rare nowadays, but if you work for the government, you tend to have that. And again, like I said before, the name of the game is diversification. It's not having all your eggs in one basket, because you never know what's going to happen. I can't predict the future because you're right. Disney could go out of business, and that's a blue chip stock. At the same time, we could be in another global pandemic. There could be a war going on. Like there's so many different things happen that are out of our control. That's why diversification is key, and starting sooner is better than later. Every dollar you contribute to retirement in your 20s is worth, I believe, about $1,000 in your 40s, right? So starting now can be the name of the game for retirement when it comes to that. Now, another thing too, I want to emphasize, your Robinhood account, a mutual fund and things like that, that's not a retirement account. The key thing though, is if you're going to want to retire before standard retirement age, guess what? Your 401k is not going to be the way to do that because you're going to get punished. Do contribute to that, but sit down with someone to see about what other options there are out there so you can actually have income pre-retirement age, like 55, for example, without paying significant tax penalties for doing that.
Would there be a situation in which you would not recommend a 401k to somebody? For my and let me just preface that a little bit. I think the idea of a 401k came out a lot of times with employers and also from financial institutions about wanting basically employees of a lot of large companies to allow the financial industry to manage their money and be able to execute trades and everything like that. And it keeps the person who's contributing that, it prevents them from being whimsical and just trying to cash out every couple of years because they're in a slightly down, that's why the penalties are there. But I guess maybe someone who's skeptical, who's saying like, oh, I don't need to do this. Would there be a legitimate situation in which you would say, you know what, for your situation where you're in, we're actually not recommending you contribute to a 401k product?
It would be very rare and unusual, but I can't say no because everyone's situation is different. Now, what may happen is that I would say, hey, based off of your goals, right, and your desires. For example, if someone I want consistent income that I know will come in no matter what, and even with the permanent life insurance, that's not secure enough for me. I need to know it's coming. Basically a pension, right? But they don't get that offered by an employer. Well, then I would say, well, still contribute to that 401k, right, up to the employer match, get the free money. But then instead of putting an extra, let's look at talking about an annuity, for example. So an annuity is basically you're a private pension. You're buying a pension. Same thing with the 401k, though. You get punished if you take out the dollars prior, and depending on the annuity, is tax advantage, what have you. Basic part of it is that for most fixed income annuities, when you are hit retirement age, it'll pay you a certain amount of money every month for the rest of your life, right? So that would be one scenario. Other scenario would be someone who wants to retire early. Someone wants to retire by 50. having all their eggs in a 401k or an IRA, they're not going to be able to retire by 50.
Right.
So that's when you get into more conversations like, okay, well, let's put a lot into these permanent life insurance policies so that you have enough to pull for those years prior to 59 and a half. And then you can start pulling from these other retirement accounts. Or let's look at a non-retirement related mutual fund account or what have you. The only exchange for that is that you're not paying taxes, obviously, with the money you're putting in because it's not deducted pre-tax, but you do pay capital gains tax and stuff like that. There's other implications there. It really, at that point, depends on what the person is looking for. At the end of the day, if you have someone who just does not trust the stock market, who does not believe in that, then the best solution would be a cash-based solution, an annuity, that permanent life insurance policy. And then if don't trust any of that, well, find a high yield savings account and put as much into that, because the worst thing you can do is just sit on a ton of cash in a standard savings account or under the mattress, because those dollars are just being eaten away by the changes in the cost of living.
Yeah, I think that's, as we've gone through these 3 different episodes and kind of the original intent of wanting to do filming these sessions with you is, I've dealt with a number of cash buyers, and as a listing agent, I've received a number of cash buyers and cash offers. And one of the things I see these bank accounts with $500,000 just sitting there, and you see them, they're time stamped, and this 500,000 has just been sitting there for like 3, 4, 5 years. And, bless the people, because they're working very hard, they're living below their means, and they're saving money. In the most basic sense, hurrah, like good job saving that. But what we just saw between 2020 and 2023 is an incredible increase in inflation, specifically over this last year, right? Yeah. And that $500,000 is not worth as much in purchasing power then as it is now. And so that's the kicker, is that you really shouldn't be sitting on these mountains of cash. Now, I think everybody should have a certain reserve amount, right? Whether it's 6 months of your income, some people want an entire year of their income in reserve, plus all their house expenses. And they always want to have that just in cash sitting there as a safety net. That's fine. That's appropriate. That's recommended. But when you start to have 14 years of, basically saved up income as a reserve, basically a savings reserve, well, you have probably 12 to 13 years of that. That's not going to waste, but that's not doing the best that it could to continue on your wealth journey, to continue to compound, to continue to be put into certain products and certain avenues that have been set up specifically for this, right? These have been set up so that people don't have to just sit on a mountain of cash, right? It can actually grow in the market. It can actually grow appropriately. All right, 2 stupid questions. Maybe they're not stupid. Is this unlimited? Can I just put as much money as I want into these 401k products, or is there a maximum contribution that you can hit for this? I think that there's an answer to that. I'm kind of leading the witness here. Like, is there a max or is it unlimited?
There is a maximum you can do. Off the top of my head, I do not remember that.
That's fine.
But
no, that's
there
fine.
is a max. You can't put 100% of your income into a 401k.
Okay.
And because at the end of the day, too, you got to remember Uncle Sam wants to be able to pay his bills.
Right. So, I can't put $2 billion in a 401k.
Now, one thing I do want to mention, because we were talking about inflation, the other aspect to the problem with having so much cash is, guess what? This is the first time in definitely our lifetimes and generations of Americans where the U.S. dollar's world reserve currency status is in question, right? I can't tell you that the dollar that we understand today will be the same thing in 20 years with the rate the debt's going, with the rate inflation's going. And so having cash, the worst thing that can happen is that becomes valueless, right? If it's in the stock market, guess what? Those multi-trillion-dollar companies, billion-dollar companies, they'll just trade in whatever that new currency is if you have a full replacement. Or there'll be different options on how to sell those shares out. You can play currency, which I don't do with my clients, obviously, but there are different options out there. So having just so much cash, unless if it's a specific savings goal, right? If you want to save $200,000 for a down payment on a house, or to pay for that house outright. Fine, there's a goal. Or have 12 months. That's kind of the maximum we recommend of fixed expenses in an account for a God forbid situation. That's great. $500,000 in the account just for the sake of having it in a standard savings account. For one, if that bank goes under, you lose half of that. Secondly, you're really actually shooting yourself in the foot when you actually think you're helping yourself. And that's the worst case scenario.
And you said lose half of it because $250,000 is the FDIC basically insurable amount by the federal government. Okay. All right. Second question. Can I have 2 401ks? Or
I mean, not two that you can actively contribute to. You can have 2 that you technically, because if you think about it, the one from a previous employer, if it's sitting there, that's still owned by you. It's still growing. Now, you can't actively contribute to that because then it's not a 401k anymore because it's after-tax dollars. But if, let's say, you move that over to a mutual fund, you can be like, I'm going to put 5% of my income into this 401k, 5% into that mutual fund. At that point, it's up to you because you own that. You're no longer in a tax advantage space in that point. But you can technically own multiple. You just can only contribute to one.
Okay, so I'm actively only contributing to one, but if I've worked for 3 different employers, I work for this company for 10 years, company A for 10 years, I work for company B for 10 years, and I work for company C for 10 years. I had a 401k the entire time I was with A. When I moved from A to B, I've stopped contributing to that, but it continues to grow, and now I contribute to my B 401k. Yeah. I stopped contributing to that. That's now capped at what's been contributed, and it will just grow, and A's been growing this whole time. And then I now have my C company, which I'll contribute for that, and I can. So I see what you're saying. So yes, I can own multiple, but I'm only actively contributing to the employer that I currently have because of the pre-tax, post-tax dollars that go into that. Okay. All right. So that makes sense to me too. All right. I feel like we're kind of nearing the end here with this. I have a pretty good idea of this now. So designated retirement account, it has to be a qualified account. There's generally a specific age limit required with it. The main difference between 401k and the Roth IRA is when the money goes in, is it taxed up front? Or is it taxed on the way out? The risks associated with it are, hey, this is based on market securities that do go up and down in value. So depending on when you need to cash out, it could be an up market, it could be a down. It does ride with inflation though. So it's better than just cash under the mattress because it does go with the economy and it raises up over this period of time. Like you said, especially since the federal, the world reserve, dollar being that currency is in question, yes, I do think that there's some concern on that. Do I think it'll go away quite soon? No, but again, we're talking about a time scale of 30 years. You can't predict this stuff, and don't try to predict this stuff. Don't try to be this soothsayer, crystal ball genie, saying like, well, I know that it'll never happen. We didn't know anything 4 years ago, and everything is different now. I mean, that's 4 years. Think about 40 years, right? If you're 29 and a half right now, or excuse me, 19 and a half right now, and you're going to contribute for the next 40 years into this, and at 59 and a half, then you'll start to be able to take this stuff out. You have no idea what's going to happen then. And to just, like you said, sit on cash, you are doing your future self and the future people who are going to rely on you an incredible disservice. So, all right, well, this is, we're pretty much rounding the end of the bases here with this. So I think what I'd like to do here, Ben, is, we've gone through life insurance and all of that. You could go and take a look at the video on the channel for that. We've gone through disability insurance. We've gone through retirement planning. And these are really good 3 topics to start to know about. But I think the most important part now is it's time to take some action, right? This is something that I don't want you to sit on. I don't want you to wait on. It's something that today you can have a no contract, no expense conversation with, and personally, I would recommend you guys over at Northwestern Mutual, yourself and the partners that you work with there. So I'd love to be able to pass anybody who's interested. You can contact me. You can contact Ben directly in order to kind of just have that first conversation. I'll tell you, it was illuminating, Ben, when I had my first conversation. It's one of those things that I know how much I have in this checking account, and I know how much I have with my financial advisor, and I know how much, here, and I have a good idea of my expenses, and I know those things. But when we finally got it all down on paper, and you guys did a bang up job of kind of giving an analysis around this, 75% of this battle of doing better with your finances is just knowing where you are today, and then just having someone who does this for a living recommend the next couple steps. And like, don't make this any more complicated than that. Don't make this any more complicated than just start with today and have somebody who's smarter than you with finances give you a couple recommendations and spell them out for you. And then you make one decision and you see how that goes. And then you get comfortable with that. And then you learn about something else. And then you make the next decision. So, Ben, I want to thank you again for doing these 3 sessions with us. This has been really great. We'll make sure in each of these videos that everyone has access to your information, again, with mine, to make sure that anybody, whether you're watching these from the real estate channels that I'm promoting this on, through Ben, through anywhere, we just want to make sure this is good information. As we've seen, this has been a tumultuous year. This has been a tumultuous couple years with just finances and making sure you're steady. And now more than ever, everybody's thinking about, how can I protect for the long term, both my physical assets, my relationships, my money, my home. I want to protect. I'm here to protect. I want to build the moat around what I've built for myself. And these 3 things that we've gone over are some of the best things we can talk about, from protecting you and your family, protecting your ability to work, and then protecting your ability to work when you get to that age when you're ready to retire. All right. So anyway, Ben, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for watching these couple episodes, and hopefully we're talking soon. Bye.
Thank you.